The mansion stood tall, wrapped in golden lights that shimmered against the December night sky. A soft layer of harmattan dust floated in the air, giving the evening a hazy glow. Inside, laughter echoed through the wide halls as the Dagara family gathered for their annual Christmas celebration. For outsiders, the Dagara family represented power, wealth, and influence. At the center of their empire was Michael Dagara, a young, sharp-minded CEO whose company had risen to become one of the most admired in Africa. Yet ask anyone in the family where their true anchor lay, and they would all point to one person: grandmother, Adeline Dagara. Adeline was the matriarch. Silver-haired, soft-spoken, but sharp-eyed, she carried wisdom that guided the family through storms. To Michael, she was not only a grandmother, but the voice of his late parents, the one who had raised him with discipline, prayer, and relentless love. But on this Christmas night, no one knew they were about to lose her. The grand ballroom was filled with music, a live band playing carols that blended with the scent of roasted turkey, jollof rice, and freshly baked pies. Children ran around, in their Christmas sweaters, their laughter ringing like bells. Crystal chandeliers glowed warmly overhead, and in one corner stood the towering Christmas tree, draped with red, gold, and green ornaments. "Grandma, you look stunning." Michael's younger sister Anita rushed to hug Adeline, who wore a flowing emerald gown and her favorite pearl necklace. Adeline chuckled. "Ah, my dear, at my age it's not about stunning, it's about still standing." Everyone laughed. Adeline had a way of turning even a small joke into wisdom. As the night wore on, speeches were made, gifts exchanged, and prayers lifted. Michael stood by his grandmother, quietly watching her interact with relatives and family friends. For all his success in business, nothing mattered to him more than her smile. But while the room sparkled with joy, one man's eyes burned with something darker. At the far end of the hall, John Dagara, the younger brother of Michael's late father, watched Adeline carefully. He was dressed in a sharp navy suit, a forced smile plastered across his face. Outwardly, John was part of the family, respected and trusted. But inside, envy had long eaten away at him. To John, Adeline was an obstacle. For years, she had guarded the family estate, ensuring fairness and protecting Michael's inheritance. John, however, wanted more. He had always believed the empire should be his. Later that night, as the party spilled into smaller conversations, Adeline stepped out into the quiet garden for fresh air. Her knees ached, and she leaned slightly on her cane. That was when she heard it, John's voice, low, whispering on the phone behind one of the pillars. "Yes, everything is almost set. She's too sharp for her age. If she talks, it could ruin everything. No, Michael doesn't know yet. After tonight, she won't be a problem anymore." Adeline froze, her heart pounded. Was he talking about her? She leaned in closer, careful, not to be seen. John ended the call quickly and slipped back into the house. Adeline's hands trembled as she clutched her cane. She had always suspected John of greed, but this was something else. The party ended around midnight. Guests left with smiles, children carried their presents, and the family slowly retired to their rooms. Adeline kissed Michael on the cheek. "My boy, tomorrow we'll talk. There's something important you must know." Michael smiled. "Of course, Grandma, good night." It was the last time he saw her that night. By morning, Adeline was gone. Her room was empty, the bed untouched, her phone left behind. The household staff said they had not seen her since the night before. Panic spread through the mansion. Michael searched every corner, calling her name until his voice cracked. Anita burst into tears. Relatives whispered. The news hit the staff. Like a thunderbolt, the matriarch of the Dagara family was missing. First, They thought maybe she had gone for an early morning walk. But when hours turned into a full day with no sign of her, dread filled the air. Police were called, flyers printed, private detectives hired. The media got wind of it, and soon headlines screamed across the nation. Mysterious disappearance of Adeline Dagara shocks nation. Michael barely slept. He held press conferences, pleading for information, promising rewards. But days turned into weeks, and still no trace of his grandmother. And all the while, John played his role perfectly, standing beside Michael in public, pretending to be concerned while secretly satisfied that his plan had worked. One cold night in January, Michael stood in his office, staring at the family portrait on the wall. His grandmother's smiling face looked back at him, and for the first time he felt powerless. "Where are you, Grandma?" he whispered into the silence. But far away, on a lonely dirt road outside the city, Adeline Dagara was alive, weak, bruised and wandering, dumped there by someone she trusted, left to die or disappear. The empire thought it had lost its heart, but the story was only beginning. John Dagara had always lived in the shadow of his elder brother, Michael's late father. Growing up, he wanted power, wealth, and respect. But no matter how hard he tried, he was never chosen to lead. His brother inherited the family empire. And when tragedy struck and Michael's parents died, it was Adeline who stood as guardian, ensuring the company passed to young Michael when he came of age. John smiled in public, but bitterness ate at him in secret. He was the uncle who gave gifts at birthdays, who stood by Michael during public events, but in his heart he despised the boy and the woman who protected him. To John, the empire was his by right. He only needed to wait for the right moment. That moment came when Adeline uncovered something she was never meant to see. She had stumbled upon documents that revealed John's manipulation of company accounts. He had siphoned money quietly for years, covering his tracks with clever signatures and fake transactions. One evening before Christmas, she confronted him directly. "John," she said softly, her sharp eyes fixed on him, "do not think I don't know what you've been doing. You are destroying this family's name with your greed." John had forced a laugh. "Adeline, you're tired. You're old. Maybe your memory isn't what it used to be." Her gaze never wavered. "The truth always comes out. And if you don't stop, I will tell Michael everything." Those words sealed her fate. On the night of the Christmas party, John gave the final order. While the family slept, a pair of men loyal to him slipped into the compound. Adeline was taken. Quietly, a hand pressed over her mouth so her cries would not echo. She fought weakly, her cane falling to the floor. Within minutes, she was gone from the mansion. By dawn, she was miles away, bundled into the back of a pickup truck. The men drove her out of the city, far beyond the bright lights and the paved roads, into a dry stretch of land dotted with trees and abandoned huts. There, under John's command, they dumped her with nothing but the clothes on her back. "She won't survive long," one of the men muttered as they drove away. Adeline lay on the ground, her body aching, her heart broken, not from fear but from betrayal. She had lived long enough to see much, but never had she imagined her own family's blood would cast her away like trash. The days that followed were harsh. She wandered from one dusty road to another, weak from hunger and thirst, her knees made every step painful, and her once elegant clothes tore into rags. Strangers sometimes gave her a piece of bread or water, but most saw only a frail old woman, a beggar with nothing to offer. She prayed as she walked, "Lord, if this is the path you have given me, give me strength to endure. Keep my children safe. Keep Michael safe." Meanwhile, back at the mansion, the family refused to give up the search. Michael hired detectives, placed adverts in newspapers, even spoke on television, begging for help. Crowds gathered to pray with him, and volunteers combed through fields and forests. Each day ended in disappointment. Anita fell sick from worry, her young heart breaking with every unanswered question. Michael tried to stay strong, but the sleepless nights wore him down. Alone in his office, he pounded his fist on the desk. Why, God, why her? She was the soul of this family. And yet, through all the grief, John continued to play his part. He placed a hand on Michael's shoulder, pretending to be a supportive uncle. "We'll find her, son. Don't lose hope," he said, his face painted with false concern. Behind closed doors, however, he poured himself a drink and smiled. For months past, the mansion grew quieter, as though joy itself had left with Adeline. The empire struggled. Michael kept up appearances, but his spirit was wounded. He worked harder than ever, hoping the company would not crumble under the weight of sorrow. Every achievement felt hollow without his grandmother there to witness it. Adeline, now almost unrecognizable, drifted from one town to another. Her once proud back was bent. Her hair, once silver and neat, grew wild and matted. She had lost weight, her face hollow with hunger. People no longer saw her as a grandmother from a powerful family. To them, she was simply another forgotten soul wandering the streets. But fate has a strange way of guiding footsteps. Slowly, without realizing, Adeline was making her way back toward the heart of the city. And without knowing it, she was heading straight for the empire she had fought so hard to protect. For months had passed since Adeline's disappearance. The city had returned to its usual rhythm, but for the Dagara family, nothing felt normal. The mansion was quieter, the Christmas decorations long taken down, yet the emptiness lingered. Michael had thrown himself into work, determined to keep the company alive in honor of the grandmother who had raised him. But every night when he returned home, he felt the same heavy silence pressing down on him. The newspapers still carried her picture from time to time, though fewer people paid attention now. At first, the whole nation had joined in the search. Prayer groups had gathered, strangers had volunteered, but as months passed, the noise faded. People moved on. The world kept spinning, while the Dagara family lived with a hole in their hearts. Michael's face grew harder. His smile disappeared. To his staff, he was still the brilliant young CEO, but those closest to him saw the weight he carried. He spoke less in meetings and often stared too long at the photo on his desk, the one of him and his grandmother at his graduation. "Boss, are you all right?" his assistant asked one evening as he signed a stack of contracts. "I'm fine," he replied quickly, though his voice betrayed the truth. He was not fine. He felt like a man carrying an empire on his shoulders, with no anchor to steady him. While Michael struggled, Adeline was living another kind of battle. She had become almost unrecognizable. Her once fine clothes were now torn and patched with scraps she found along the way. Her cane was gone. Instead, she leaned on a crooked stick she had picked up by the roadside. Her hair was wild and streaked with dust. Her face was thin, her eyes sunken. People who passed her on the street saw only a weary old beggar. Some gave her coins, others waved her away with irritation. She learned to sleep on benches, in church doorways, sometimes in abandoned stalls at night markets. Hunger gnawed at her daily, yet through it all, she prayed. Every step she took was whispered with hope. "Lord, guide me. Don't let me die here. Lead me home." Step by step, unknowingly, she wandered closer to the city where her family lived. And slowly, fate brought her towards the empire she had fought so hard to protect. In the tall glass building where Michael ran his company, life went on. Deals were made, meetings were held, and staff bustled through the sleek hallways. Among the staff was a young woman named Clara, the receptionist. Clara was beautiful, ambitious, and proud. She loved her job because it gave her a sense of importance. She sat at the front desk like a queen on her throne, deciding who was worthy of stepping inside and who was not. Clara had grown used to turning people away. Sometimes they were salesmen, sometimes job seekers, sometimes poor people who wandered in by mistake. She had little patience for anyone who didn't look polished or important. In her eyes, appearance told you everything about a person. One hot afternoon, Adeline dragged herself into the city. Her knees shook as she leaned on her stick, her clothes hanging loosely from her frail frame. The sun burned overhead, and sweat trickled down her wrinkled face. She paused often, breathing heavily, but something inside her pushed her forward. The noise of cars and the towering buildings overwhelmed her, but still she kept walking. When she finally turned a corner and saw the tall glass tower with the Dagara name boldly written across it, her breath caught. She didn't recognize it at first, for she had never seen the new headquarters in person, but something stirred in her heart, telling her she had reached the right place. With trembling steps, she crossed the busy road and approached the front doors. People brushed past her without a second glance, some wrinkling their noses, others pulling their children closer. She must have looked like any other homeless wanderer, but for Adeline, this building was her last hope. She pushed through the doors and stepped inside. The cool air of the lobby washed over her, a shocking contrast to the heat outside. She blinked at the polished marble floors, the shining chandeliers, and the bustling workers moving in and out. And then her eyes landed on the receptionist. Clara looked up from her desk, her neatly manicured nails tapping against her keyboard. When she saw Adeline, her face twisted in disgust. In that moment, two worlds collided. The grandmother who had once sat at the heart of the family empire stood before the empire itself, stripped of everything, unrecognized and unwanted. And the young receptionist, who judged by appearances, was about to make a choice that would shake the company to its core. Adeline stood in the lobby, her eyes wide as she took in the towering building. It felt like stepping into another world, clean and shining, so different from the dusty roads she had wandered for months. She clutched her stick with trembling hands and looked toward the front desk where Clara, the receptionist, sat typing quickly on her computer. "Excuse me, my child," Adeline said softly, her voice cracked from thirst. "Please, I need to see Michael. My grandson works here." Clara raised her head, her perfectly shaped brows arching as she stared at the old woman in front of her. The torn clothes, the dusty shoes, the uncombed hair, all screamed poverty. Clara's lips curled into a smirk. "Grandson," she repeated mockingly, "do you know where you are? This is Dagara Empire. The CEO of this company doesn't have time for people like you. Go outside and stop disturbing our peace." Adeline's heart sank. She tried again, her voice firmer despite her weakness. "Please, child, I am not lying. I need to see Michael. Just tell him his grandmother is here." Clara laughed loudly, drawing the attention of two junior staff who were passing by. "Grandmother, you, look at you. You don't even look like. You have a roof over your head, and you're claiming to be related to the CEO. Madam, please, don't embarrass yourself. Out." Adeline's eyes welled up with tears. She had come so far, pushed her frail body beyond its limits, only to be mocked and rejected at the very doors of her own family's company. She pressed her hand against the desk, desperate. "I am telling the truth. If you will just let me," Clara stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the marble floor. Her tone grew sharp, her voice cold. "I said, out. You people always come here pretending, thinking you can get money or sympathy. This is not a charity home. Leave now before I call security." She stepped around the desk and moved closer to Adeline, her heels clicking on the floor. With a swift, impatient motion, she grabbed Adeline's arm and shoved her toward the exit. The old woman stumbled, nearly falling, her stick clattering against the floor. A few staff gasped, but no one moved to stop Clara. They had all seen her temper before, and no one wanted to get in trouble. Adeline caught herself against the glass door, her body trembling. For a long moment she stood there, her head bowed, her tears dripping onto the floor. She looked back one last time, her voice breaking as she whispered, "I only wanted to see my family." But Clara had already returned to her desk, adjusting her hair as if nothing had happened. The staff in the lobby avoided Adeline's gaze, pretending to be busy. Slowly, painfully, Adeline pushed open the door and stepped back into the scorching sun. Her heart was heavy, heavier than it had ever been. After months of suffering, after fighting to stay alive, she had found her way home only to be cast out by her own blood's gatekeeper. She walked away, her shadow stretching weakly on the ground, thinking that perhaps her family no longer wanted her. Perhaps she truly was forgotten. But the story was not over. Inside the building, cameras had captured everything. The insults, the push, the way Adeline had been thrown out. And somewhere, in the upper floors, Michael Dagara was about to learn the truth that would shatter his heart and change everything. Michael was in his office when the head of security knocked and entered, carrying a file. His face was troubled. "Sir, there was a little disturbance in the lobby earlier today. You should probably see this." Michael barely looked up. He was tired from back-to-back meetings and endless paperwork. "A disturbance? Handle it. Why bring it here?" The man hesitated, then slid a tablet across the desk. "It's best you see for yourself." With a sigh, Michael pressed play. The footage came up from the security cameras. At first he watched absent-mindedly, just another ordinary day in the lobby. But then his eyes caught the frail old woman who shuffled in, leaning on a stick, her clothes in rags. His heart gave a sudden painful jolt. She lifted her face toward the camera, and in that moment, Michael's breath caught. His hand trembled as he gripped the edge of his desk. It couldn't be. It was impossible. Yet he knew that face. The shape of the jaw, the eyes, the familiar curve of the cheekbones, even hidden behind exhaustion and dirt. "Grandma," he whispered. The video played on, showing Clara mocking and pushing the old woman out. Michael shot to his feet, his chair toppling behind him. "Where is she now?" he demanded, his voice breaking with urgency. The head of security shook his head. We don't know, sir." She walked out before anyone could stop her. Michael grabbed his coat and rushed out of the office, his heart pounding. For months he had searched, prayed, begged for even a clue. And now, by the cruelest twist, she had been right here. Turned away at his very doors, he stormed into the lobby, his voice booming. Clara, the receptionist, froze, her face draining of color as the staff turned to look. "Why, yes, sir." Michael's eyes blazed with fury. "Do you know what you've done? That woman you mocked, the one you threw out like garbage." His voice cracked, and he had to pause to steady himself. "That was my grandmother. My grandmother." A gasp rippled through the staff. Clara's lips trembled. "Sir, I didn't know." "She looked like you didn't know because you judged her by her clothes, by her face, by her weakness." Michael cut in sharply. "You forgot the first rule of this company. Respect every human being that walks through these doors. You are finished here. Pack your things. You're fired." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she knew there was no pleading her way out. She lowered her head as security escorted her away. Michael turned to his staff. "Find her now. Check every street, every corner. Bring her home." Cars were sent out. Security teams spread across the city. Michael himself joined the search. Refusing to sit still, he drove through busy markets, stopped at bus stations, and questioned strangers. Hours passed, but he didn't give up. Finally, near a crowded roadside stall, he saw her. Adeline sat on a wooden bench, her head bowed, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. She looked so small, so fragile, yet still dignified even in her rags. Michael leaped from the car and ran to her. "Grandma, Grandma," his voice cracked with emotion. Adeline lifted her head slowly. Her tired eyes searched his face. For a moment, she seemed unsure, then recognition dawned. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she whispered, "Michael, my boy." He fell to his knees before her, wrapping his arms around her trembling frame. "I thought I'd lost you. Forgive me, Grandma. Forgive me for not finding you sooner." She rested her weak hands on his shoulders. "You did not lose me. God kept me, and he has brought me home." Crowds gathered around, moved by the scene. Some cried, others whispered in awe as they realized who she was. Michael called for a car, lifted her gently inside, and held her hand the entire ride back to the mansion. News spread quickly. By evening, television channels carried the story of the miraculous reunion. The nation that had mourned her disappearance now celebrated her return. But there was one last matter. John, the investigation that followed, exposed his betrayal. Documents, witnesses, and confessions from the men he had hired all came to light. Michael confronted him face to face, his voice cold. "You took my grandmother from me. You tried to destroy this family, but you failed. Justice will deal with you." John was arrested, his mask of respectability ripped away. For the Dagara family, healing began. The mansion once again echoed with laughter, though now tempered with lessons of humility, patience, and faith. Michael made sure his grandmother received the best care, surrounding her with love and honor. And every Christmas after that, when the family gathered, they told the story of the year Grandma Adeline was lost and then found. It became more than a memory, it became a reminder that wealth means nothing without kindness, and power means nothing without humility. And for Adeline, sitting at the head of the table once more, there was no greater joy than to see her family restored, her grandson stronger, and her enemies defeated not by hatred, but by truth.